Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report. My apologies for getting things off started late. Episode 348, last episode of 2021. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, our usual cast of characters: Gail from Community Digital News, NY Fights, Daniel from the Inscriber, and For Boxing News. What's going on, lady and gent?
Ladies and gentlemen, pour yourself a beverage. It's the last one of the year, and we're going to let it rip.
Yep.
Absolutely. Again, early apologies for those who checking us out live. Uh, even though it's a holiday, work still continues for all of us. So if you hear some clicking in the background, Daniel still at. I'm not gonna say where he's at, but he's still uh, putting he's on the he putting on the grind. He's on the grind right now still. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report live YouTube show, podcast, blog/website discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. For you, those who wanted to find all information regarding the show, the blog page/site is the place to go to. b4pboxingreport.com. Let me repeat that: b4pboxingreport.com. On the page itself, if you want to find out, you'll see where to follow us all over social media, where to follow the show on social media: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, IG. If you want to email us, you can do so at p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport. Love to hear from you, questions, comments, what we can do to improve the show, what and what you like about the show. Also on the page, links also have links to where to find us all over the podcast world, or any RSS feed distributed podcast outlet, be it Spotify, be it Google Podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else in between. You will find Pound for Pound Box Report. If you do so, look for the show with the black background, red gold lettering. The previous logo with the gray and the red boxing gloves. Those are from our previous episodes, updated a while back. So look for the black background, red gold lettering. That's the new version of Pound for Pound Box Report with all the latest episodes. And also, if you want to donate to us, I know we're in the holiday season, but if you have some coin left over from buying gifts for whoever, please shoot some coins at Pound for Pound Box Report. Catch Me and PayPal donation links are on the site. Let's get things going. I'm going to switch things here, Gail and Daniel, in terms of the order in which I put it in the docket that I sent out earlier. Um, let's move. Let's start with the ladies here, and I'll go to, usually I go to Gail first, but I'm gonna switch it up here, and I'm gonna go to you, Daniel. Gilberto Ramirez, right? He fought Yunieski Gonzalez on headlining a DAZN card or a Golden Boy promoted show. But I want to start with the ladies first. Two world title bouts featuring women. Um, the first one was Marlen Esparza, where she defended her flyweight title against Anabel Ortiz. We talked about the show. We talked about this last week. We previewed it last week, Daniel. Um, I kind of low key thought that Ortiz, who was a champion down at that strawweight, I thought she could give Esparza a decent go, and Esparza had a lot to prove because in her title win, she got knocked down and she had to dig deep to win. She claimed the title, but some thought she may have lost. She kind of rectified herself, made amends, if you will, in this fight against Ortiz. She had her way from beginning to end, won by easy, clear-cut decision. Looked very well in doing so. One of her better performances, Daniel. So, if you saw the fight, your breakdown of it, and what do you think is next for her in 2022?
I did. I did see the fight, and yes, Marlen looked a lot more prepared, a lot more fluid, more comfortable at the weight in this fight. And granted, unfortunately, the opponent didn't really have much as far as power they're able to stop Marlen from executing her game plan. Well, but she did pull some veteran tricks later on in the rounds. But Marlen looked very, very comfortable in this fight. I think just the nervousness of now being a champion, now defending the title. I think that weight has lifted off her shoulders now. And she talked about after the fight, obviously, that she wants to unify the division, even though we all know the fight that she actually wants. But she looked comfortable. Her combinations were good. The only thing is she has to still work better on her footwork. Her footwork still has to improve greatly when it comes into weaving in and out and making sure that their opponents don't land any other punches. That necessarily because that already cost her once, and for her sake, it shouldn't cost again.
Okay, this fight took place in the entire card with I mentioned that this was on the undercard of fight featuring Zerto Ramirez. It took place at AT&T Center in San Antonio. I want to move on to the other women's world title fight, Gail. The reason I named this particular episode Super Bad was in honor of Seniesa Estrada, who's for boxing fans who do not know, her nickname is Super Bad, and she really, really proved it in her fight against Maria Santizo. Santizo, undefeated, really, really hungry fighter in her backstory in terms of her being a professional, having 9 fights, but in more than half of the fights, I think 6 of her fights, she was not paid. Put her up her own money. I think 30,000 in debt as a result. So the incentive to win was high, but Estrada Gail, Seniesa, um, I knew she was good. Last week I alluded to the fact that there are pundits who call her the Lomachenko of women's boxing. And she really showed that in this fight. This was easy. This was easy work. And just like Vasily Lomachenko, often will look like he toys with opponents. She did that against Santizo. She did it all. Matrix-like, showed skill, unique ability, and power to boot as she stopped her in 4. Daniel mentioned in his breakdown of Esparza how she wants a rematch against Seniesa Estrada. They fought in 2020. Estrada beat her right by decision. I know Marlen Esparza wants that rematch, but based on what I've seen from Seniesa Estrada, she may want it, but I don't think she'll beat her. Estrada, she looks sensational.
I don't think Esparza really wants any of that smoke. I don't think so. I mean, she goes along with the banter and the back and forth, but boy, the few times I've seen the questions put to Esparza, you almost see her physically shrink as if she thinks, damn, I'm not sure I'm really up for that beating again. The only advantage Esparza has is that she is naturally quite a bit bigger than Estrada. And Estrada's attitude is, what do I care? I'm going to still kick your ass. She is a product of East LA boxing, a very fertile ground for a lot of tough Mexican American fighters. She learned that attitude from the boys. She fights just like them. And she has developed such good punching accuracy and placement in addition to her other skills. That is what's letting her knock these girls out. And it was pointed out, if you watched the DAZN broadcast in the post-fight interview, if she had that 3rd minute, her knockout ratio would be very impressive. She just avoids knockouts at that 2 minute mark. A lot of girls could really, even under a power puncher like Estrada, can really handle, get out of the round and handle it for that short period of time. And it does make for more back and forth in fights, but Estrada would be taking out girls a lot quicker than she is. And if you do the math, and I've done this before, aided by Lee Groves of CompuBox fame, who's probably out there listening, if you take away that 3rd minute from a lot of notable punching artists, knockout artists on the men's side, the knockout ratio for the top women against men at 2 minutes is almost identical. So if you don't think you like women's boxing, you need to watch Ms. Superbad. She is the real deal. She is in the very smallest weight divisions. She is willing to move up and down. But when we saw her on Saturday, she says very candidly, 105 is absolutely, minimum weight is her best division. And she showed why. She wants to unify with the IBF champion from Costa Rica in early 2022. That's a great plan. Shouldn't be hard to make that kind of fight. I'm sure the Costa Rican fighter, if she's willing to come to the United States, can make a lot more money than she probably ever has in her career so far. So we'll have that to look forward to in the first quarter of 2022.
It's going to be interesting where she goes. You mentioned how she wants a unification bout against Yacasta Valle, who's IBF champion at 105 pounds. The reason I say it's going to be interesting where Estrada goes, because about a year for her, 2021, she made the first defense of this strawweight belt. But before then, in her last fight, she won a title at 100 at junior flyweight, beating Tsunami. The fight with Esparza took place at flyweight. Am I wrong in thinking, Gail, that Seniesa Estrada could beat everyone at 105, could beat everyone at 108, could beat everyone at 112? Dare I say she could beat everyone all the way up to maybe bantamweight? She's that good?
105, not a question. 108, not a question. Get to 112, she, I think, would still beat everyone at 112, but maybe not, with these blistering, flashy knockouts. She might have to grind it out. Same at 115, that would be a challenge. She is, she really is a natural 105. And she says when she is not particularly training or watching her nutrition, she walks around at 112. So she'd be a very small 115. I have no doubt if she manages to unify at either 105 or 108 or both, she'll take her shot at 112 and she'll give 115 a try. I mean, she has nothing to lose. Why wouldn't she? She could absolutely rule all of the lower weight divisions for women without.
I think the only person who I can see giving her a really good go within that weight range is Bob. Jessica Bob, who has a BA title at 108 pounds. Outside of that, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. And I know
there may be some rising stars. We might end up seeing some girls out of the Olympics. You never know. That's a few years off, most likely. And there is a lot of rising talent because they are seeing women like Estrada, Taylor, Serrano, and some of the other names doing really well, realizing finally there is a path for them. So there may be some young talent out there in the years to come to challenge Estrada. Right now, for sure, at 105 and 108, none. 112, I don't see it either. She gets to 115. Yeah, I think that'd be a little tougher go, but that's only because That's just not her natural weight division. You might see the sort of drop off you'd see from, for example, Chocolatito, whose best performances were in the lower weight classes.
Let's move on to the main event of this card at the AT&T Center in San Antonio, and that is Zurdo Ramirez, Daniel, former WBO super middleweight champion. Um, he's been largely irrelevant, not irrelevant, but he's viewed as an afterthought. I mentioned that last week, that when you talk about prominent guys from 68 and 75, a lot of folks don't mention him, not out of fear factor, because people really don't care, right? uh Part of that is been his own doing as a result of battles outside of the ring with promoters. uh, he feels that he's turned over a new leaf, signing with Golden Boy earlier this year. Looked good in his last fight against, I believe it was Sullivan Barrera. Stopped him in four. Returned to the ring against Yunieski Gonzalez. He ended up stopping him, I believe, in 10 rounds, but Gonzalez had his moment. At times, I thought that Zurdo, because he knew that Gonzalez was slow of foot, uh, uh, he could afford to stand there in the pocket and fight. But the problem is, there are a couple times where he got buzzed. Um, though he got the win, was that his smartest performance? To me, at times he fought stupid. He was just able to get away with it.
It's a combination of thinking that you're fighting stupid, but at the same time, you have to shake off a bit of reputation, because one of the reputations, unfortunately, that Zurdo had was that he was a boring fighter. And a lot of that has to do probably more with matchmaking. It's probably one of the main reasons why he left Top Rank. And this is a situation to me of like the right guy finding the right promoter. Because he went to a promoter now after trying it himself a little bit and not having a lot of success, but finding a promoter in Golden Boy that will not slow walk you. They will match you tough, even if you're one of their top guys. So they're putting him against somebody in Yunieski Gonzalez who has fought well, has unfortunately been at the bad end of some hard luck decisions, and who also knows this is probably also his last shot of relevance at 175. And Zurdo, for the most part, maintained himself a bit of control. He used the jab well. He didn't get into many exchanges, although I think it was probably in the middle rounds where he started letting Yunieski land a little bit and started getting buzzed. But it wasn't as bad that you would think that Yunieski would take over the fight. Because at that point, Yunieski himself accumulated a lot of punishment from Zurdo when it came to the jazz, hooks, and ultimately the way it ended the fight. It was, from a technical standpoint, a semi-bad game plan. Don't let an opponent, especially an opponent that has power like Yunieski, try to land shots, but at the same time, he does aesthetically, and from a marketing standpoint, he definitely needed to do that, because otherwise he's going to have the stigma of being a born fighter, and that's something that's hard to shake off. And when you're already looking at the picture and you're positioning yourself for Bivol, and if you position yourself for Bivol, the actual thing is you're positioning yourself for Canelo. You have to show that you can bring something to the table. So in that sense, it was a smart performance from that standpoint. But from a technical standpoint, I would probably stay away from it for the time being.
Daniel just mentioned, Gail, that he's trying to that Zurdo's trying to position himself for Bivol, who we talked about on the previous episode. He returned to the ring defending his title. after this fight, Zerto said called Dmitry Bivol out. Bivol WBA uh, champion at 175 pounds. Are we for sure that's going to be the next fight for both men?
No, not at all. I think we will probably see it next year, but Beterbiev might be a lot more interested in unifying with either Joe Smith Jr., who I think will be his next opponent, or if that fight for some reason can't get made, and there's really no promotional reasons why it can't. In fact, it makes the most sense since uh, they're both allied with Top Rank. Um, that he might want Bivol. The problem with Zurdo is he doesn't have a belt. So he's at the end of the very short list of opponents for Beterbiev. Um, and truthfully, why wouldn't Zurdo want to wait until Beterbiev sorted out, everybody else there and make that fight, which is a risk for him, totally worth it? That, however, we have to slow down for just a minute. That comment made assuming Beterbiev wins. That is not the smartest assumption. Bivol may be boring to watch. I don't know what the heck's happened to him in the last few years. He used to be willing, when necessary, to tangle, and he has plenty of power when he feels like deploying it. He blasted through Joe Smith. He blasted through Sullivan Barrera long before Zurdo did. But he is such a slippery tactician that I think Beterbiev will have problems with him. If Beterbiev can pin him down and wail on him, Bivol can take a punch. It's certainly not assured that Bivol or Beterbiev would be the winner. In any case, you might have Beterbiev, you might have Bivol. Joe Smith's in the mix because he's got that belt. I think you're going to see those guys all, play together first before Ramirez gets a shot. So he is probably going to need some kind of stay busy fight. What I do like is that he's willing to get in there and stay busy against an opponent, on the level generally of somebody like Yunieski Gonzalez, to stay in front of the fans, put on an entertaining fight. That's absolutely the right approach, the smart thing for him to do. And the truth is, Golden Boy's stable of stars is a little bit limited. Ryan Garcia is still MIA. Virgil Ortiz is going to come back with a stay busy fight for him early in 2020. And then they've got Zurdo. So Zurdo wants to stay busy. Golden Boy needs to keep him busy. So they're playing very nice together right now.
Going back to you, Gail, as we go from Texas to Montreal, Canada. Um, as the aforementioned Beterbiev, and for those who are checking out us live or will check out the show out on YouTube, Gail's avatar is the one of WBC IBF light heavyweight champion Artur Beterbiev, and how he looked after his fights against Marcus Brown. Um, and that little elongated thing that you see on Gail Zavi in terms of Beterbiev's forehead is get him getting stitched up after suffering a significant cut early in that fight, right? Um, Beterbiev won. He stopped Brown. I want to say in round 7, I believe it was, but there were a lot of criticisms thrown his way after the fight, Gail. There were those on boxing Twitter who said that if he was to get in the ring with Canelo in a proposed match, that Canelo would beat him easy. Andre Ward on Twitter let me put that back. He suggested that Beterbiev is showing signs of slippage. I read similar comments about Beterbiev as well. I didn't see it. I just thought that, Brown, he got off to a good start. And Beterbiev has always been a slow starter. If you look at his career, tradition, whether it was Caleb Johnson, he got knocked down there. Gavostick, he got off to a bit of a slow start there before he came on. To me, in a sense, cut aside, this was typical Beterbiev. He surveys the scene. Uh, he tests out his he don't test out his opponent. He takes a look at his opponent, and then once he figured things out, he kind of slowly but surely steamrolls, and that's what he did in this fight. Your thoughts on what you saw from Beterbiev against Marcus Brown, as well as the reaction from boxing Twitter?
First of all, if I am Marcus Brown's next opponent, I am going to watch my forehead. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, damn, because that cut, which if you're watching live and see this avatar on Beterbiev, was virtually the identical cut Brown opened up on Badu Jack. I mean, it was just uncanny how similar they were. And they both bled just about the same amount, which is to say, buckets full. It looked horrible. I was ringside for the Badu Jack fight, and truthfully, as bad as they look, the cuts are in a place where they're obscuring the fighter's vision during the fight, God knows, and there's enough blood to where you really have to worry about things being slippery, the blood affecting performance, but they're not inherently dangerous cuts, which is why that fight continued as long as it did. But boy, did it engage Beterbiev's sense of urgency. I mean, once he was cut, boom, here we go, because he knew he could not count on finishing out the fight. So for the fans, that was a big plus. And he was able to control the ring, land with power. I was surprised how many of the shots weren't exactly where he wanted them to go. But Beterbiev had been out of the ring quite a while, and now due to this cut, he's going to get another enforced break, unfortunately. So I'll attribute it to that. Other thing with Beterbiev is, he is the oldest of this group in the light heavyweight division at 37. Because of his lengthy amateur career, he didn't start his professional career, until into his 30s quite a bit. So he needs to be a little bit concerned about the clock ticking as well. So far, so good. He just, he needs to stay active, and damn it, this cut's gonna slow him down a little bit. But he did what he needed to do. There were a lot of people on boxing Twitter. Oh, Marcus Brown's gonna win. Oh, Brown's gonna take care of business. Yeah, he's gonna shock the world. We've had some shock the worlds the last few weeks. This wasn't one of them.
I'll go to you, Daniel. We talked about Bivol, Zerto in terms of future there. You mentioned that Bivol could go for a unification bout against Beterbiev. When this cut heals, because he's going to be out for a significant number of time, I'm guessing 3 to 4 months just to let the cut heal before they even think about him getting in the ring. Where do you think Beterbiev goes? I mentioned how people were comparing him to Canelo. That possible fighters out there, assuming Canelo doesn't fight Makabu at cruiserweight. There's also Bivol. There's also Joe Smith Jr. If you're top rank, if you're his handlers, Michelle, right? What direction would you take him?
Oh, I would probably see what mandatories are there to do, particularly IBF mandatories, and try to see if we can negotiate something. If it's not a mandatory, a voluntary defense, do something that you're not going to be in too much danger of, because you have a payday waiting for you when it comes to Beterbiev. You can do the match with Bibble. Joe Smith is probably the one that you want to see as long as he handles his business. And obviously, the big fish is going to be Canelo. This cut automatically makes sure that he doesn't get next, which probably also throws Canelo's plans a little bit out the window in some areas. But if you want to keep the payday, try to get a voluntary defense. Try to get somebody that is not going to give you, is not going to be in the way too much as far as giving you problems. Now, whether you can wait until September, that's going to be what the situation is going to be, because you don't know if Joe Smith is going to make it out of his fight. And we don't know what Bibble's going to wind up doing, because at the end of the day, even though you guys are somehow semi in the same umbrella under Eddie's Klimas, different promoters, and different promoters have different agendas. So I would probably say rest a little bit, let that cut heal, because that was a nasty cut, and then try to get a voluntary defense, a soft voluntary defense that makes you look good. So whoever you're gonna get next, particularly if you're angling straight for Canelo, you look good enough where the fight comes September, then looks better on paper.
On the undercard here, and I'm just going to leave this. Whoever wants to talk about it, please do. I wasn't able to witness it live. I was covering other matters for Three Kings Boxing, right? No. I'm sorry. I wasn't covering other things for Three Kings Boxing. I was actually coming home late from work, right? Had a women's title fight between Marie Eve Dicaire, Decarie. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing her name wrong. Fighting Cynthia Lozano for vacant belt at 154 pounds, IBF version. Um, I didn't see the fight live, but uh, I joined a group of boxing writers. Uh, Gail Daniel was part of their group of boxing writers, and based on their analysis, based on what I read on my Twitter feed, uh, three words come into mind apparently, and that is "what the hell," because in terms of the what they were witnessing, it was head scratching what went down. Whoever wants to talk about it, break down what took place. I didn't see it, but from my reading of my reading, it was just like, what in the world are we watching right now?
Well, here's the problem. In those higher weight divisions for the women, and 154 and up are the heavier weight classes for women, there is very little quality competition. The women boxers, women in general who are athletes, just simply aren't that big. Once you've stripped down, you're in good shape, you're not carrying a whole lot of weight. Look at the guys that are 5'8", 5'10". you know, with the exception of Canelo, apparently, they're not carrying a lot of weight, and women are not going to carry as much weight naturally for their height anyway as an equivalent tall man. So you get to 154, 160, it's the same problem Clarissa Shields has, is there's not a lot of women out there to fight you. So credit to Zano for taking the fight. It's probably a good payday for her. 9-0 record, passes the box rec eye test. But you know what? Miranda Adkins passed the box rec eye test too. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't pretty. Marie Eve is a power puncher. She snapped this girl's head back like a Pez dispenser most of the night, and finally it got called. And you can just see, the eye test, watching the two of them, at what different levels of quality they're operating. It isn't her opponent's fault. She did the best she could. She's just simply not at that level. So when you're Dicaire, what are you supposed to do? You fight who's in front of you. You have to take on opponents like that, or you'll never get into the ring. There's just such limitations on what's there for you. There seem to be more options in MMA because you're dealing with a much broader pool of talent and types of talent. So it doesn't surprise me when I see women heading to MMA like Claressa Shields has done for somewhat the same reasons. That's the state of women's boxing. And the truth is, it happens in some of the men's divisions too. When somebody has really blown through a lot of the available opposition and they just, they take who's available because it's better than sitting on their ass. Not a lot, but it is better. So that's what we all ended up having to see. The truth is, speaking about that card overall, when Steve Rolls puts on one of the best performances of the night, no disrespect to the man, but seriously, it was really lacking. All due praise to broadcaster Corey Erdman, who really carried the broadcast, in a very admirable way, given what he was having to, do his play-by-play on. He didn't have a lot to work with.
Yeah. From what I was reading, it seems like the lady that Dicaire fought, she just stepped into the gym 6 months ago, and all of a sudden they just wanted to put her in the world title fight. That's not good. It'll be interesting to see where Dicaire goes. Will she unify? If Raquel Miller can still make the weight, Miller has been off for a long while. Her mother passed. She's had her mother passed, right? And she took time to grieve from there. She recently returned a couple of weeks ago. If she can still make 154, I would love to see Dicaire fight her. Let's just see where it goes, because moving forward, she needs better opponents than what she faced last weekend. I mentioned there was a card that the main event I would not talk about, even though it ended by a sensational knockout. But on this card, Daniel, there was one prominent real fighter, in my opinion. That was Amanda Serrano, defeating Miriam Gutierrez. Easy win. She won every round. I felt she won every round. Pretty much that's how the judges scored it. Let's talk moving forward. I read comments where she was asked about a fight with Katie Taylor. She really didn't address it during the post-fight, but it seems that's the fight that's going to happen. What percentage do you give that we will finally see Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor in April as it's being proposed at the Garden?
Higher than 50. Higher than 50, because the performance that Amanda put in that fight, she was trying to make a statement. She was trying to say, I'm the draw, I'm the power, I'm the knockout queen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In women.
You sound went out on us, Daniel. My bad. Go ahead.
All right, no problem. Like, what I was saying is that it's more than 50%, because if you saw Amanda's fight today in that card, she was trying to make a statement. With the work rate that she was punching, with the power she was punching, she was making a statement and sending a message to Katie Taylor saying, I'm the knockout queen in this part of women's boxing. You're going to have to see me. We also have to remember the other reason we have to see her is because family syndrome is kicking in, because one of the fights that Katie Taylor won, and won pretty easily, was the fight with her and Amanda's sister Cindy. And if you remember the post-fight, how that looked afterwards, Amanda was pissed off. pissed off at Katie Taylor. And negotiations fell out the first time, but from what it looks like, I know, despite the person technically technically helping funnel the situation, this is the person we're not going to talk about, but Lou DeBella, I think, is also involved too, so that gives us some credence. She has a good team behind her. She can go and now either do the UK, but MSG is the way to go. MSG is definitely going to be the way to go because you're going to have to bring Katie at some point to the U.S. shores to face other fighters, and it's New York City. You're going to have a good mix of Irish and Puerto Rican, although in this case, I'm pretty sure Puerto Ricans are going to dominate in this sense, given current world events. But I give it more than 50%. Let's just make sure the contracts are signed.
Yeah, yeah, and hope both ladies get paid top dollar to make the fight happen. One more fight we're going to talk about. I'll take care of it right quick. As I'm Naoya Inoue, we talked about last week. He's making his return home to Japan, defended the unified WBA, IBF bantamweight titles against a Thai fighter by the name of Dipaen. Pretty much a glorified sparring session. As far as I saw it, I watched it on delay. In a way, basically broke him down with body shots throughout. Uh, Used the jab to step inside. Dapion, he just didn't have much resistance. Didn't have much tools in many tools in his arsenal in this to really trouble in a way. In a way, really didn't face any resistance. Had he could get in and out and do pretty much what he wanted. Round 4 or 5, you can really see him going to town with hooks to the liver, to the kidney area, and that's the point where Depion started to slow down, and ultimately left hook to the body hurt him, left hook to the head put him down, and he just finished him off. The question for me is, what does he do in 2022? He's talked about unifying the titles at 118. He's also talked about how he wants to move up to 122. My hope is that he he fights Donaire. He fights the Casamayor. Those are the fights for him at 118. He does that. He gets that work out the way before he moves up to 122 pounds. Fans would love to see the rematch with Donaire, of course. As we all know, they fought in November 2019 in the finals of the World Boxing Super Series tournament. Um, in a way, beat him in what many felt was the fight of the year. Casemiro has been run his mouth about fighting in a way ever since he won the WBO title, shocking Zolani Tete in 2018, 2019. I forget the year, but he's gotten under Inoue's skin. Let's hope that he fights either of those guys before moving up to 122 pounds. Let's move on to some news here. And some news that kind of broke actually during the fights that took place over the weekend, as um, the WBA has granted Yordenis Ugas his wish. For those who do not know, basically as soon as Ugas beat Manny Pacquiao for the title, he's been calling for a fight against unified WBC IBF champion Errol Spence. He positioned the WBA to let that fight happen. Well, Gilberto Mendoza, in a tweet over the weekend, said that basically said that yes, he's going to give Ugas his wish. Staniosis, who is the number one contender, has agreed to step aside. Probably a hefty payday. A hefty payday comes with that. But Gail Daniel, it looks like we're going to see another unification bout at 147 pounds between Errol Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas. I'm expecting it to happen in March, April 2022. Your reaction?
Props to the WBA. Gilberto Mendoza said after he took huge heat over the proliferation of belts, they were handed out like Cracker Jack prizes, that they were going to clean things up. And to his credit, he's really started doing that. So for people who are irritated about this fight being ordered, you know what, folks? If you were angry about all the, phony belts floating around, and now you're mad because the WBA is working on cleaning all these things up, you gotta pick one or the other. You can't have it both ways. I don't hate this fight at all. Makes a lot of sense. And the truth is, if Spence ends up taking that belt off Ugas, which he has a darn good chance of doing, it ups the stakes for the Spence and Crawford fight. That's absolutely the right way to go. Now, yeah, I get it. Yet again, this fight's getting delayed. Crawford's going to have to cool his heels, and he's in the position now that, probably not quite as bad as Maria Dicaire was, but he is going to have to take some somewhat stake-busy fights, and he really can't take a seriously challenging fight, like a Boots Ennis or a Virgil Ortiz, because, he doesn't want to derail getting to the Spence fight. So he's going to have to be a little bit cautious on his end until Spence takes care of business. And there's the matter with Spence of, that's still got to be negotiated. And he may have people whispering in his ear saying, are you sure you don't really want to take a tune-up fight first? Can we talk about this? Credit to Spence for not taking tune-up fights. He did not take a tune-up fight coming off his accident. He went right to Danny Garcia. I do think he'll be willing to take on Ugas. I'm very curious to see how he looks. There's a lot of questions yet again about his condition, how he's doing. Was that orbital bone issue from the accident, or was it from combat in the ring? We don't know. Even if he and his team have a fairly good idea, medically, nobody can really say for sure what it was. So it'll be a little bit disappointing if that injury tends to cause him problems. We'll have to see what happens. But I was really surprised over the weekend to see how many people moaned and groaned over this, mandatory. I don't have a problem with it at all. That's progress, folks.
Let's address the situation of how salty some folks were in the aftermath of this announcement. Before I go to Daniel about this, let's go to you, going back to you, Gail, kind of a follow-up. You mentioned how Bud is going to have to take another fight in the interim towards a proposed bout against Spence, right? You mentioned maybe not Virgil Ortiz or Boots Ennis. How about this scenario? Keith Thurman is out there. He announced his comeback to the ring. Let's say if Thurman is successful, if he wins, right? How about a Crawford Thurman bout spring, summer? He fights, and the winner of that fights the winner of Spence Ugas.
It's doable. The question is whether there really is interest still in Thurman. Would Crawford be better off fighting somebody like, I've heard Castillo Clayton mentioned. I've heard Stanionis.
No offense. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no.
Now who's getting salty? Yeah, they're going to have to solve that problem. Is Thurman the solution to the problem? I don't hate it. I think there's going to be some pushback on Thurman, but, I think Thurman's got one foot out the door is the problem. I don't think he needs the money. I don't know if he's bored. I don't know what his issue is. He hasn't had a fight since July 2019, and he lost that fight. We're going to be into 2022 before we see him in the ring again. It's Bud Crawford really the guy he wants to stand in front of after all that time? I don't know.
Um, I'll go to you, Daniel. Here's my issue with the folks who are all in their feelings in the aftermath of the announcement by the WBA. What is wrong with y'all? That's my question. What is wrong with y'all?
Michael, I just have to.
Daniel,
I'm just loving this.
Spence is coming off of a pretty significant injury, detached retina. And by the time he gets in the ring with Ugas, it will be his first fight in a year and a half. Are you out of your mind given the layoff and given the injury that you guys think he just come back ASAP against a fighter like Terrence Crawford? That makes no sense. So if he wants to fight Ugas next, if he fights Ugas next, or even if he was to say come back and fight a Thurman, that should be perfectly fine. You don't sit there and put him back immediately against the likes of a Terrence Crawford, given what he's gone through in terms of injuries and layoff. I say it again. What is wrong with y'all?
Part of it is the fact that you're this close now. You're so close to getting Spence Crawford, and these two have been circling around each other for years, particularly these two. And now with Bud's promotional situation a little bit more fluid than it was before, we have a situation now where the fight is so tantalizingly close. So, unfortunately, for some people, any delays, even if it makes logical sense, is something that they don't want to hear. In this instance, you know what? Ugas earned Ugas earned a decent payday after beating Manny, and why not do it with somebody that's in your stable? It still keeps everything within the PBC, so you're not going outside the lines in that front. And from an opponent standpoint, yeah, if you're Spence and if you don't really want to do a quote unquote tune up fight, if you're comparing to Ugas, is about as close as a tune up fight as you're going to get then. So that actually factors into it. And ultimately, and this is probably the part that people don't see the forest for the trees here, that makes the fight with Bud, should Spence beat Ugas, for undisputed at welterweight. That gives them a touch at history. And since we're talking about history, you could say, and this might be ego stroking, this that depends who is listening, but you can actually go and say, I did something that Floyd Mayweather didn't want to do, chose not to do. Unified the welterweight division when he had the capability to do it. That's the part that people forget into it. And I think probably the other part that people are scared to, we don't know if we're going to have WBO shenanigans. Maybe they do order the mandatory versus Virgil. Or maybe they order a mandatory versus Boots Ennis. And this also goes the other way too. What happens if after this fight with Ugas, this is probably also a reason for people around. What happens after the fight with Ugas? IBF just says, okay, your mandatory is now Boots Ennis. So now that gets further delayed. I get it, but
Follow up.
there's steps, but it's just so close.
Follow up quickly before we move on. Let's just say the WBO orders it. Would Golden Boy allow that fight to happen now? Let's just say the IBF orders a fight with Boots. Um, would his handlers, would they allow it now, or would they want to wait in the cut and see how all this goes, and maybe let these guys get a little bit older and then jump at the opportunity and say 2023?
In the best situation, you would wait to 2023, but the situation is presenting itself maybe because I talked about like how Spence and Bud have been circling each other. Bud and Virgil have been circling each other a little bit too, talking a little bit of smack to each other. And like I said, there's really right now no promotional delays that people say that Bud has that prevents him from fighting Virgil. So that may be the monkey wrench that throws into it. But if you're Oscar, like we were mentioning to it, you're probably gonna tread a little bit carefully when it comes to Virgil. You're probably not gonna give him the next fight because we obviously we know he already has something already lined up. But probably slow it down a little bit. Probably see what the IBF's gonna do. Because I think in the IBF, it's Boots 1 and Virgil 2. So the IBF could easily order Virgil versus Boots for the IBF mandatory spot. So there's a lot of ways this can go. It just depends on who's pulling shenanigans. I get why some people are mad, but at the same time, don't stop looking at the forest for the trees.
Yeah, indeed. One last bit of news before we shut things down. It's not gonna be any previews this evening, previews of upcoming fights. It's going to be our last episode of 2021. News broke earlier this afternoon. I want your reaction quickly, Gail, Daniel. According to ESPN, Virgil Ortiz, the aforementioned Virgil Ortiz Jr., highly ranked welterweight number 1 by the WBO at 147 pounds, has agreed to fight Michael McKinson early next year. Michael McKinson, do you know anything about him? Because I have to admit, I really don't. I mean, I get it. He's coming back to stay busy, but who?
Again, we have this issue of, are we supposed to have these guys sit on their ass waiting for the perfect opponent? Or are they better off taking fights like with Michael McKinson, who's 21-0 with 2 knockouts? Let me repeat that. 21-0, 2 knockouts. Again, you look at that and you wah. But much better to keep these guys in front of the public, in front of their fans, in the ring with a real fight, stay busy. Hey, it beats sparring. It gets butts in the seats to see them live. And in McKinson's case, he is a southpaw. He's a little bit of an awkward guy. He's certainly no threat to Ortiz Jr., at least on the face of it. Yet again, one of these guys who's fought pretty much domestically his entire career. His only fight outside of the boundaries of the United Kingdom has been in Gibraltar. He was on one of those cards for, Matchroom. But it also introduces Ortiz Jr. to the British fans who will want to see this. They're all going to go home disappointed, I'm sure, that their guy is lost. But let's hope they also go home impressed. The other big question is, so where's this fight going to happen? It would not at all hurt Ortiz Jr. in this case to do this fight in the UK on different soil, outside of Texas, outside of California. See how he handles it. See how he handles being on the road, because the day's going to come where he has to do that. Not necessarily outside the U.S., but that would be a very good experience for him to have. Ortiz Jr.'s amateur career was, a little bit limited. He was not an Olympian. So I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. And if this is Golden Boys matchmaking, bravo to them. I think that's a very smart fight for them to make. So let us call out Robert Diaz and Eric Gomez for making it happen.
Yeah,
Quick word on this,
com-
Daniel.
completely agree. Like I said, they have Virgil's one of the guys that they have to carefully move when it comes into it because he is one of their new building blocks. So put him in a fight where, yeah, the opponent may not pose that much of a threat as far as being in the ring, but it does give Virgil the experience of being on the road, particularly being in the UK, seeing in that crowd because, like we mentioned, Boots, not Connor Ben is now in the picture. So the UK may have to show up again when it comes to the welterweight division. So there's a lot to gain from it. And like I said, it keeps Virgil busy. And once the Spence Bud situation is cleared up, do we know what's going to happen? It may be perfect timing for him.
I don't know if this makes much sense now, but given how Conor Ben has looked and how we talked about him last week and how he's improved, I would love to see a Virgil Ortiz battle against Conor Ben as a world title eliminator. I would love to see it. I think it'd be a heck of a fight. I make Ortiz the favorite, but the way Ben has been looking, he would be Ortiz's toughest fight.
Oh, no question about it. That's a corker of a fight. But neither promoter is really going to want to put it on the line for these guys in that way just yet. The stakes need to be a little higher. They need to build a little bit more of a fan base. They're still working their way there. I think that fight, should they both continue to be successful, is very makeable. We'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to start to shut things down on that note. I've been reiterating, this is going to be our last episode of 2021. Just going to give you, Gail, and Daniel. First of all, let me say that when we come back, I don't know what they'll be, but it will be sometime in January. Get your stuff ready, Gail and Daniel, because we're going to do our recap of 2021 when we return in 2022. So knockouts of the year, fighter of the year, fight of the year, prospect of the year, all that. Do your homework, do your due diligence right now, because when we come back in 2022, that's going to be part of the agenda. But up until then, give your last words here. If you want to wish someone a happy holidays, boxing related, final word here on our final episode of the year.
Well, my wishes go to you, the listener, because you're the ones out there that we do this for. The folks that want to think about boxing beyond what they see in the ring, hear the news. For whatever reason, here the three of us opine, and put our opinions out there. I would say very well-based opinions. And I personally have really enjoyed the contributions of the listeners, the comments, the follow-ups. That's what makes the show happen. You could listen to a whole lot of boxing podcasts out there. You're listening to this one. So my holiday wishes go to you, and let us hope that after the couple of years we have all been through, 2021 was not a bad boxing year considering. So I guess that Sweet Science Santa decided we were all better boys and girls than maybe we thought that we were. Let us hope we shake this damn corona off and we get another great boxing year in 2022. So my thank yous go to you. My warmest wishes go to you. And, oh man, let's kill it in the new year.
Last words for our 2021, Daniel.
Yes. Well, 2021 has been a very, very exemplary year. It's been A year that we have gotten some surprises, and we've also seen some new stars emerge in the sport. And it's also been a trying year. Obviously, there has been delays. We're not going to have a real major New Year's Eve card in Japan that has been traditional the past few years. But we've gone through it. We've gone through the slog. We've seen some good fights. We have seen prospects move along. We have seen new champions crowned. We have seen upsets. We have seen retirements. And let's just hope that 2022 rolls out the same way, because the heavyweight picture is becoming more vibrant again. The welterweight picture is going to be interesting. And
yeah,
who knows what we're going to see at light heavyweight, depending on what Canelo wants to do. So, folks, let's just get ready for 2022. Hopefully, it prevents as many surprises, the good surprises, as 2021 did.
and yeah, I would just like to co-sign what Gail and Daniel said. I want to thank everybody who's been rocking with us, not only this year but over the years. Um, I want to thank all those who take the time out to listen live and to comment as well, whether it's Unbridled, whether it's Logic, whether it's Lee Groves, Dan the Man, Denise Bell, who drops in from time to time. I can name so many others. I want to thank previous guests on the show, um, be it both from Truth and Facts, be it Jacob, who made his return from a long hiatus uh, a couple of months back. Um, I want to thank Nika. I want to thank Sadet. I want to thank Minnie Larry. Um, in the ring with Christine, who joined us on the Ladies Love Boxing Show, which I told him this personally. I'll say it again here on air, was uh, I'll not I will say here as our best episode of 2021, best episode pound for pound boxing report in a long time. In terms of in the ring, 2020 was rough, given the pandemic. We're still going through a pandemic right now. This new variant Omicron has, as Daniel alluded to, causing concerns over that, has scratched the end of the year shows in Japan, and unfortunately making an impact on boxing here in the States. Uh, let's hope that boxing continues to recover and overcome um, the COVID-19 pandemic that's ongoing. And in 2022, let's hope all the potential big fights that are there, be it Tyson Fury in a possible fight with Usyk, the business at light heavyweight and unification bout there. Canelo, you got the middleweights out there with Charlo and Andrade and Golovkin. The unification bout between Jamel Charlo and Castano, what happens at 147 pounds, what happens with the lightweights and Tank Davis and Devin Haney and Cambosos. And I'm not going to mention Garcia because until he gets in the ring, you can't mention him. Shakur Stevenson, what will he do in 2022 after putting on the best performance of his career, his defeat of Devin Haney at 130 pounds? What's going to happen at 115? Will we finally see this WBC tournament and the trilogy between Gallo Estrada and Chocolatito Gonzalez? What will Inoue do at 118 and 122 pounds? What will happen in women's boxing? The ascendancy of Seniesa Estrada, who we talked about on the show, Marlen Esparza, who we talked about on the show, Clarissa Shields and Savannah Marshall. Looks like that fight is going to happen. That's going to be big in 2022. So let's hope that all of those big fights happen. Alicia Baumgartner and who made a big splash on the scene, Michaela Mayer. Let's hope that unification bout happens at 130 pounds for the women. So let Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano, who we talked about earlier on the show, let's hope all the big fights that are potentially on the table, let's hope that we see as many of those fights as we can in 2022. That is my sincere hope. And again, thank everybody who joined us. Thank everybody who rocked with us. Wishing you a happy holidays. Uh, go around the panel here. Do you even know I didn't begin the show with ladies first this episode? Going to end the show with ladies first. Gail from Communities Digital News, NY Fights. Where can folks check you out to talk boxing, to talk media, or to check out your regular appearances? Not regular, but just semi-regular appearances on TMZ Live. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
So my regular column, which is your previews and recaps, appears at Communities Digital News, which is COMM, Digi News.com. I am diligently working away on those best subs for the end of the year, and I don't think it's going to be too tough this year, maybe with the exception of Knockout of the Year. I'm still considering that one. And Michael, no, it will not be Jake Paul. The rest of my work, which is a little more spicy, shows up at New York Fights, nyfights.com. And Chavez Paul for the Bridgerweight Championship in 2020.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Yeah, controversy continues around Chavez. So I didn't mention it, but he also fought over the weekend. He won, quote unquote, but the official scorecard was not announced publicly. So, yeah, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is still Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Let the controversy ensue. And teaser prospect of the year, I think that's an easy call. Let's just say my pick for prospect of the year is a guy we've interviewed on the show. It's a kid that we've interviewed on the show and who we all think very highly of. I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter, Rawkus99, RAWKUZ99. Yeah, the list I have to think about it. I do have to think about it because there have been some late entrants in some categories. Although, like, I will stand with Gail. Jake Paul will not win Knockout of the Year. No. Flat out, no.
But we do have quite a few good candidates. It's not an obvious choice this year.
Yep. So it's going to be interesting. Like I said, it's been a pretty bountiful year considering the circumstances. So hopefully we'll have the list ready, and we'll see y'all folks in 2022.
Absolutely, absolutely. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, you know what it is with me, Brother JR at Brother JR76 on Twitter. As I said at the opening of this particular episode, for those who want to check out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. If you check out the sites, you'll find links to where to follow us all, where to check us out all over social media. Pound for Pound Box Report on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, IG, Tumblr, where you can check out the show on various podcast outlets, be it Spotify, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Google Podcasts, be it Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else in between. Also links to where you can donate. Like I said, on the next episode, not going to mention specific fights here because that's to be determined, but we will do our state of the game, our recap of 2021, where we will talk fight of the year, fighter of the year, prospect of the year, anywhere in the upset of the year, and what we want to happen, what we will, our predictions for 2022. Again, I want to thank everybody who's been rocking with us over the years. Really, really appreciate your comments here. Really appreciate your likes. If you like what you've heard this evening, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment on Apple Podcasts. 5-star review will get read on the show. Follow us there on Apple Podcasts as well as all platforms that the show is distributed on. So yeah, 2021 is in the books. Episode 348 is in the books. For Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights, for Daniel from the Inscriber, and for Boxing News, I am your host, Michael, wishing everyone a happy holidays. We will see you in 2022. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Stay safe, everyone, please.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Stay safe. Stay safe. And shout out to Olaf and his comments. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you listening. Yeah, thanks. I gotta give a shout out to Olaf, who's been a regular listener on the show. Again, episode 348 is in the books. See you in 2022.